Mercury is a critical planet in the horoscope. It's the planet that rules our life from 3 to 12, the age of Mercury, and that's the developing adult mind. Mercury is the crown prince, so he's the one who's growing into a position of rulership. Okay? If we look at mythology, the deity attached to Mercury is Vishnu. He's always the one that comes and saves the day. And then in Norse mythology, Mercury relates to Odin, the one-eyed, all-seeing god. So Mercury is extremely powerful if we look at some of the myths. And I've often said in my, in classes from whenever I've started studying and teaching astrology for 30 years, I always said a good Mercury will make such a difference in a person's life. If you see lots of things wrong, look for a good Mercury. In the same way, a troubled Mercury will cause us to have a lot of pitfalls. Okay? Because Mercury is the developing adult mind. Now, what that means is that we're trying to be adults about things in our life, which means we're trying to figure out how to manage this childhood trauma we carry with us. We're trying to figure out how to re-educate our parents so we can live our lives in a truthful way to ourselves. And we're constantly doing that in respect to different things as different things come into our life. So our adult mind is constantly being developed with, okay, in this scenario, with this thing, with a job, with a relationship, now I have a baby, now I've got to take care of my sick husband, now I've got this or that. We're constantly being forced to develop a greater level of adulthood in different things. So while we're focused on that from the age of 3 to 12 during the age of Mercury, we are constantly involved in needing to learn how to manage ourselves better, the child mind, and how to make better choices, which is the parental mind essentially, in everything we do. So it's a non-stop thing. Okay? I call Mercury the observing adult mind. It's the adult mind that observes. And you might be thinking, okay, so you observe, so what? Why is that such a big deal? Why is that so important? Observing, okay, you're watching a movie, not a big deal. But really the truth is it's all about observing. Because the true consciousness within us is the witness. It's the one that's observing the whole movie. And unfortunately, all kinds of parts of us get attached to the movie and think it's real. But the reality is, the truest part of us is an observer of life. So the minute we go into an observing state, we step into a magical realm, rather a spiritual realm. The name of Mercury is Buddha, the Sanskrit name, the most common Sanskrit name. Of course, it has many, many Sanskrit names, but the most common is Buddha, which means awakening and intelligent. So it's the awakening intelligence, but not just the intelligence to do math, but the awakening intelligence to know. To know what? The truth, which is what we're striving after, the truth of ourselves, the truth of a situation. In Tantra, this is the symbol of Mercury. Okay, this. This is called a Vajra, and it's a spiritual symbol. Now, what it symbolizes is this is the head, this is the body, and this is the neck. Okay? So imagine this. Head, body, neck. This is the Mercury chakra. This is Mercury here. Okay? And the energy of the body needs to communicate and work with the energy of the mind, and the energy of the mind needs to work with, communicate the energy of the body. Mercury's what lets that happen. Okay, Mercury's the critical junction here, where that everything flows through. So Mercury basically is the planet that lets you connect your mind to your body. You can't do anything well just using your mind, and you can't do anything well just using your body. Okay, so for instance, I've used martial arts as an example. If I'm just going to use my body to fight, well, you'll see people, they find themselves in the street fight, and they're fighting like this. They're just all these crazy motions. It's like funny, ineffective, and it's just going to get them killed. That's what happens when you just use your body to fight. Now, if you use your mind to fight, you study all the martial arts moves, and then something happens, somebody punches out, and you go, okay, they're punching from the right. When somebody punches from the right, I got to move this way, smack, and you get hit in the face. Because your mind cannot figure out what to do fast enough when someone's punching you. You have a fraction of a second to do the right thing. And your mind can't figure that out. So you lose. Okay? Now, we have this saying, it's not true until the truth is in your body. Okay, so a good martial artist, he learns with his mind. He learns the technique, and he learns countless techniques and countless ways of moving. And he practices those techniques and ways of moving until they're automatic to his body. Until his body just does it. All on its own without any thought. So he's used his mind to teach his body how to move. Okay? Then, the moment he's in a threatening situation and something comes at him, someone throws a punch, someone pulls a gun, his mind observes through the senses, because Mercury rules also the coverings of the body, which is where all the senses are. Mercury rules all your senses, your smell, your eyes, your hearing, your touch. So you feel someone touch you a certain way, you feel someone look at you a certain way, you see a fist moving towards you, you see someone pulling a gun, you hear a noise behind you. All these things are coming from the Mercury into the mind, and the body responds automatically and does the right thing to save yourself. That's a good martial artist. Okay? In all things in our life, that's what it comes down to. It comes about using our minds and doing the thing over and over and over again until it's in our bodies. And now we do it automatically. So, you want to learn astrology? You learn the technique? Great. Now it's in your mind. It's useless. Now you go to look at a chart, and you go, okay, I got these 20 techniques I'm going to use on this chart. Let me step through these 20 techniques and look at this chart, and then the client comes in and you're paralyzed and frozen, you don't know what to say. Because none of those techniques are in your body. Okay? There's no automatic response to anything. It's like, okay, Mercury's here, aspected by Jupiter, and you read Mercury aspect by Jupiter equals this. Okay, got it. No, that will never work. You'll never do good readings then. What you have to do, you have to learn the technique. Try it on a chart. Try it on a chart. Yes, look through the book, try it on a chart. Oh, I see that. Look on a book, try the chart. Look on a book, try it on charts. Try. Do it a lot of charts. Practice your Kung Fu astrology moves on tons of charts. The same way that a martial artist practices his moves on a dojo teammate 1,000 times before his body does it automatically. And now, when you see that thing, the knowledge just pops out of you. Your brain doesn't have to say, okay, Mercury's in this sign, aspect of this, what does that mean? You just see it, your Mercury just sees it, and boom, it pops out of you. The same way the martial artist hears that sound and just moves. Okay? So to do anything well, we use our mind to train our instinct, our body, that the natural it's just going to come out of us. It comes out of our bodies. And now we're living properly. Now we're doing something well. Okay? So this starts with observation. See, when we observe anything in our lives, we observe a baby, we observe a person, we just step back, drop everything and just look, just observe. Then things start coming together for us. Things start making sense. Truths start emerging. Consciousness starts working. Okay? And we can step into a magical place of solutions. But if we show up with ideas and concepts and prejudices and needs, we can't observe. Then all we can do is wish, long, desire, hate, judge, no observation taking place. Okay? So, observing is the first step to making things move forward. And when we observe, we just discover something in that observation. Because there's an intelligence that is always present and waiting to do something. Okay? And that is a conjunction of your body and mind. You can't just... observing doesn't mean you're considering and going, what does this mean? That's not observing. That's thinking. Not observing. Okay? We are not thinking. Thinking is bad. Okay? It's observing. And when we observe, our minds and bodies come together to provide a truth. A truthful solution, a truthful response, a truthful answer. Okay? That's what Mercury has to offer us when we use it correctly. Okay? Now, Mercury is also the child of the moon. The moon is the child mind. So Mercury is this, comes out of the child mind. It's the first thing that comes out of the child mind. And it's the ether element. And it starts the whole process of life, really. So out of the consciousness of the moon comes the Mercury, the ether element. Out of the ether element comes the other elements, and so on, all the way to the earth element. Okay? So in the manifestation of things, Mercury is the ether element. Okay? So, as the world is manifested according to Sankhya Yoga. Okay? So, this is happening out of the child mind. This is the development. The next step from the child mind is this birth of this developing adult, this observational consciousness that is able to figure things out and make things work. Okay? Now, if Mercury is in good shape in a chart, has good Logitanya Vashtas, then during that age of 3 to 12, the person had very good learning experiences. They learned to learn. They became capable of learning. We all, some people say, oh, education's useless because all it tells you is to memorize facts and ideas. It's true. What we're supposed to be doing is we're supposed to be learning how to learn. A person who knows how to learn, which means knows how to use their Mercury to observe, will do so much better in life than someone who learns 1 billion facts, memorizes everything there is to know. Okay? They're going to have a more successful life. They love making these TV shows about these super brilliant people who, they pick up a book, they read it, they know everything. And they say, oh, pick up a book in the library, pick up a book. Go to a page. Okay, what page are you on? And they start reading the page. They start telling you what's on the page. Okay, it was 10 years ago they read that book. You see a lot of movies made by that, like that. But the truth is, a person who can do that could be completely miserable and useless and not have a good life. And then they made the movie called Forrest Gump, where we just had this guy who was way below the working intelligence of a human being, had a very low IQ, wasn't intellectually competent at all. But if you watch this movie, he's just observing. He's an amazing observer. He's observing life. And he has this really, life that people love watching the movie about. Okay? He has a beautiful, successful life over it. He observes and he acts. He observes and he acts. And he acts out of what he observes, ultimately, and what he feels a lot of the time. And he has a person like that is going to have a better life than someone who knows everything that's in the books. Okay? That's really the gift of Mercury. Okay? When Mercury gets overly intellectual, there's something wrong with Mercury at that point. Okay? It's not supposed to be that way. It's about observing without the mind getting involved, so a person's mind and body can come together to act in a useful way. Okay? In all things. So good Mercury people are able to learn. A troubled Mercury, they struggle in learning, and they have a trauma. We always have a psychological trauma between the age of 1 and 3. The only question is, how severe was it? For some people it's very severe, for other people it's very minor, depending on their Vashtas and Moon and Mars, right? Now, that initial separation trauma from mother is our foundation trauma. And one day, it's going to get upset. It's going to get triggered. So, our conscious is holding the wall up against that trauma and trying to live with that trauma. Then one day, an experience happens that causes that wall to fall down. If Mercury's in bad shape, that wall is going to come tumbling down in the age of Mercury, between the age of 3 and 12. That's a very hard time for it to come tumbling down, because that's the time when a person's a developing adult. And they want to develop adulthood completely before that wall comes tumbling down. If the wall comes tumbling down before the age of 12, during the Mercury age, okay, then the person is more fragile after that. Okay? Because remember, after the wall comes tumbling down the first time, then we hold it back up, but then it's always more ready to come tumbling down. Okay? And go into that emotional, psychotic experience of being the scared, fearful, panicked, frightened, helpless child state, right? Okay? So if there's problems with Mercury, then a person had a trauma in the age of 3 and 12 that caused that wall to come down early. So they're going to be more fragile. Okay? So the minute we get afflicted moon or afflicted Mars, we have an element of psychosis in a person, which means they can get triggered back to a pre-adult state, a child mind state, and things can feel like that. Okay, they can feel that helpless, even though now they're grown up and can do everything. For that moment, they can feel as helpless as a 0 to 3 year old. Okay, and if Mercury's in bad shape, there is a trauma that makes it easier for them, the person, to be more fragile, to fall back into that childhood state. Okay, so we have to study Mercury as well to see how easy it is for a person to get tripped up and get triggered back into that childhood state. Okay. Now if that's the case, they have to heal the trauma that came up during the Mercury state, and then they can go back and heal the trauma that happened during the age of Mars or age of Moon. And we actually have to heal these traumas in the reverse order. So if you got all three of Moon, Mars, and Mercury with bad Logitati, start with Mercury, then go to Mars, and then go to Moon. You can't start at the Moon. You got to start on the most immediate layer, okay, the newest layer. So, if you're looking at charts and you see trouble in their Mercuries, you want to really focus on that Mercury. You really want to focus on what happened during this age, what happened with your Mercury, and may have them get some therapy, find a way to heal that, give them affirmations, whatever they need to do to try to heal that thing that happened on the Mercury level during the age of Mercury. Then they can go to the next one. Now, the normal time for all this to happen, for the wall to come tumbling down for the first time, is during the age of Venus, between 12 and 20. Usually a person has their first breakup that causes them to feel very unloved and triggered back into that child trauma state. Okay, for a little while. And it's normal to happen during the Venus age. But at that point, the developing adult has developed. Mercury's developed. Okay? Venus can handle that much more better. A good Venus handles that so well, it doesn't even hardly matter. A bad Venus doesn't handle it as well. But it can handle it more now. You know, Venus rules the Shadamsha Varga, which is the suspension on your car. Okay? It's the comfort or uncomfort from riding in vehicles. How big the bumps feel. How bumpy the road feels. How painful the journey of life feels ultimately. So, when those things happen in Venus, we have our suspension system. Everyone's suspension system is better or worse than other people's, but at least you have your suspension system. If you get a bad event and the wall comes falling down in the age of Venus, okay? But in the age of Mercury, you don't have a suspension system yet. So you're riding down this in a car where there's no suspension, no tires, just steel rims, no suspension, and you're just not even sitting on a chair. There's nothing there to buffer a person yet. There's not enough of an adult mind there to buffer the experience into a more realistic experience. And whereas in the Venus age, there's enough of an adult mind there to buffer the experience. So it's not as traumatic if the wall comes tumbling down in the Venus age, which is the normal time for it to come down. It'll still cause the person to make some shifts, and it'll still cause them to be more sensitive to that trauma, but it's not going to cause them to be an overly sensitive person. If it happens in the Mercury age, a person is now an overly sensitive person, which means they can get triggered into that state with extremely little provocation. What happens in the Venus age, yeah, you can get triggered back, but it's going to take much more serious provocation, more real provocation. When the Mercury age, the slightest thing can provocate this trauma response of going back to that child mind state, feeling helpless, lonely, panicky, scared, unloved, etc. Okay? So we have to study and work with Mercury very carefully. And if there's anything wrong with it, we need to really focus on healing it. Okay? And the most important thing we have to remember is to step back and observe. Okay? Step back and let everything go and just observe. Get ourselves into this observational space. It's interesting. People are interesting beings because we're very mixed. So say a person can have a good Mercury, but a terrible Gemini and Virgo. Okay, say they have Mars in Gemini or Virgo. So Mars is starved there. So Mercury, signs are not doing great somehow. But then maybe they have a Mercury-Venus conjunction, let's say in Leo, where the Sun is delighting Mercury and Venus is delighting Mercury, and they got this fantastic Mercury, And when you see someone with these contrasts, or they have a bad Mercury, a troubled Mercury, but a delighted planet in the sign of Mercury, so Venus or the Moon in the sign of Mercury where it's delighted. So they have good Mercury sign, but maybe their Mercury's not that good. And it's when you spend time with people who have these mixed indications, a good Venus and bad Venus signs, or good Venus signs and bad Venus. When you see the sign's good and the planet bad or vice versa, it's really a good astrological experience to spend time with people who have that, in the sense that you will see how they could be in this state of misusing their Mercury or Venus, whatever the case might be. And then all of a sudden they'll shift into using it correctly. A situation will demand it. So they'll go through life, just screwing up their Mercury, let's say. And all of a sudden a situation demands it. And then all of a sudden they shift into a fully observational mode. Now they're in there with good Mercury, They went from the sign to the planet or whatever was good. And all of a sudden, you can just tell the look on their faces changes. How they look at you, how they look at whatever they're looking at changes into an observational mode. Completely different experience. And it's when I spend time with people who have very good planet with very bad signs, or vice versa, that I've just been able to sit there and go, okay, here comes the good planet. Oh, here comes the shitty version of that planet. And to see the planet work great and terribly in another person is a really, really good way to understand these states, And a lot of people, a lot of us have this. Okay, a lot of us have this kind of dichotomy inside of ourselves, where we have a good planet but bad signs, or vice versa. So as always, look at the signs of Mercury. I have one person with a friend of mine. He has an exalted, fantastic Mercury. Okay, and he has starved in a sign of Mercury, Jupiter. Okay. So looking at his chart right away, I said, okay, what was the trauma that happened between the age of 3 and 12? Sure, you got an exalted Mercury, but you got a star sign in the sign of Mercury. You had to have a significant trauma for that. And he says, yes, this is the thing that happened, and yes, the thing that happened related to the planet Jupiter. Okay? So always remember the signs. And if you can, and if you watch people who've got the planet good or the sign bad, one or the other, you'll find one of them is not better than the other. So a good sign isn't better than a good planet or worse. Okay? It happens according to need. When the person is allowed to get by using their bad planet or their bad sign, they're going to do it. But when they have no choice but to rise to the occasion of the good planet or the good sign, whatever the case may be, then they'll rise to the occasion of that. Okay? So it more depends on circumstances that determine what planet a person is going to use. And there's something really important to understand in that, and that is that it's good for people to be in difficult situations because it helps them, it forces them to access the good side of their planet. Okay? If we always put a person in a good situation, then we're enabling them to always use the bad side of a planet or sign, whatever the case may be. So it's better to not enable people and trust that they have something on this planet, enough delight in a sign, that when they really need to, they're going to rise to the occasion and feel good about themselves because they're going to act in a way that can cause a person to feel good. Okay? Instead of enabling people, which is essentially never giving them an opportunity to use the working part of their planet. Because it's a lot easier to have other people do things for us, right? It's a lot easier to have everyone else do everything for us than it is to rise to the occasion of using a part of our planet that we're not in the habit of, because we're also in the habit of using it in a difficult way. And it's always easier to use something in a negligent way than it is in a difficult way, meaning in a rise to the occasion. It takes an effort and it takes a belief in oneself. And that's why we have to go looking at core avashtas of the lights, the moon and sun. Because those have to do with our inherent sense of belief in ourselves. If we have an inherent sense of belief in ourselves by good moon and sun avashtas, then a person that gives them the energy to rise to the occasion of the good parts of their other planets. Their good avashtas, and use that. If a person has trash moon and trash sun, they don't have the sense of self and faith in themselves that things can work out for them to rise to the occasion of their better avashtas. And so they're more likely, when a planet's got a mix of avashtas, it's very easy for them to just go with the negligent aspect, the bad avashta. Okay? So as always, we always need to study the entire chart. Okay? But Mercury is important. A good Mercury is what helps a person observe, understand, and out of that observing, simply understand the right thing to do. See, you don't need a teacher if you've got a Mercury, a good Mercury. You don't need to be told what to do if you have a good Mercury. By observing, you'll find the right thing to do. Because all the teacher can do is tell you things. But through observing, you can, through observing, you're learning what to do. Observing is what gives you the capacity to learn what to do. So it's not what you know that matters, it's if you know how to think. And that's what a Mercury gives. It teaches a person, it makes a person know how to think. Not what to think, but how to think. How to observe. How to learn through observing. How to feel the truth manifest as an action from that observation. Or from that observation for words to manifest that are truthful. Or without that observation, those words would not happen. Okay? Okay, I think that's a good intro on Mercury. And then we'll get on to the planets that are delighting Mercury in the next video. Thank you.